Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of his underground shelter and watched the alien ships moving through space like hungry insects around a dead body. 300 years had passed since the last human government fell, and the galaxy declared his species extinct. But Jake knew better because he was still breathing and still angry about what they had done to Earth and everyone he had ever loved. The shelter on Titan had kept him alive for 20 years since the Coalition found his colony and burned it to ash while he was away collecting ice from the outer rings. He came back to find nothing but smoke and bones and the terrible silence that followed mass murder. Since that day, Jake had lived like a ghost in the machine, watching alien mining ships strip his solar system bare while they told each other stories about how humans had died out naturally from their own wars and stupidity. Commander Zetar of the Vorthek Empire was leading the newest expedition to harvest rare crystals from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. His ship looked like a massive spider made of black metal and hate, with legs that could crack planets open like eggs. Jake had been monitoring their communications for weeks and learned they were planning something that made his blood turn to ice in his veins. The aliens wanted to mine Earth's moon. They called it Project Moonfall and spoke about it like they were discussing the weather or what to eat for lunch. The moon was where humanity had built their first real cities, beyond Earth, and where millions of people had lived and loved and died fighting for their dreams of touching the stars. It was sacred ground soaked in human blood and tears, and the Coalition wanted to turn it into profit margins and quarterly reports. Jake sat in his command chair surrounded by machines he had built from salvaged human technology and alien equipment he had stolen during night raids on their supply depots. His computer showed him everything the Coalition fleet was doing and saying and planning, and he realized this was the moment when silence would become complicity in his own people's desecration. For 20 years he had hidden and survived and waited for the right time to act, but there would never be a perfect moment to fight back against an enemy that controlled the entire galaxy. Sometimes a man had to choose between living on his knees or dying on his feet, and Jake Morrison had spent enough time crawling through shadows like a wounded animal. He walked to his communication array and began powering up transmitters that had been silent since the day his colony died. The equipment hummed to life with sounds that reminded him of home and hope and all the reasons why humans had once believed they could conquer the universe through courage and determination alone. His fingers moved across the controls like a pianist playing a song written in blood and memory. Jake opened a channel on the old Earth military frequency that every human soldier had memorized during the war against extinction. He took a deep breath and spoke words that had not been heard in space for 3 centuries, but still carried the weight of 10 billion souls crying out for justice from their graves. Broken Arrow 77 Alpha. The code meant humanity's last stand and final desperate hour when everything was lost, but honor remained intact. It was a phrase that had echoed through the corridors of dying ships and burning cities as human warriors made their final charges against impossible odds. Jake repeated the transmission 3 times and then sat back in his chair to wait for the chaos that would surely follow. Aboard the Coalition flagship Eternal Unity, the communication officer Talesh of the Meridian Republic was monitoring routine chatter when impossible words appeared on her screen. She stared at the message for several seconds before her training kicked in, and she alerted Commander Zektar that someone was broadcasting on a dead frequency using extinct language protocols. Zektar examined the transmission with growing confusion and alarm because his database confirmed the code was authentic human military communication from the Great Purge War, but every human was supposed to be dead and buried and forgotten. He immediately contacted the Galactic Council to report what might be the most significant discovery in 300 years, or possibly just an elaborate hoax designed to embarrass the Coalition, Dr. Velanara of the Crystalline Hegemony received the transmission data and ran it through every analysis protocol available to Xenarchaeology. The linguistic patterns matched perfectly with preserved human military records, and the quantum signature was consistent with technology from the Sol system during humanity's final years. Unless someone had spent decades perfecting an incredibly sophisticated deception, this was a genuine human transmission from someone who should not exist. Jake Morrison sat in his shelter, surrounded by machines and memories, while alien fleets scrambled to understand how the dead could speak. He had broken 20 years of silence with 4 words that would change everything, and now he waited to see if the galaxy was ready to learn that reports of humanity's extinction had been greatly exaggerated. The Coalition fleet hung in space like a collection of confused children who had just heard their dead grandfather calling their names from an empty room. Commander Zektar paced the bridge of his flagship while his officers ran diagnostic tests on every piece of communication equipment they owned, because accepting that a human was alive meant accepting that everything they knew about history was wrong. Jake Morrison watched their frantic activity through stolen surveillance feeds and smiled for the first time in 20 years. The aliens were scared and confused, which meant his transmission had hit them exactly where he intended, like a knife sliding between ribs to find the heart. He began preparing his next move in a game where the stakes were nothing less than justice. For 10 billion murdered souls, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station Harmony Prime, where representatives from 7 species gathered to discuss what might be the discovery of the century or the beginning of a galactic crisis. Chancellor Mordock of the Hegemony Council called for immediate military action to locate and capture whatever was broadcasting from the Sol system before it could cause panic among Coalition citizens. Dr. Velanara stood before the assembly with data that made her stomach twist into knots of guilt and horror. Her analysis confirmed beyond any doubt that the transmission was genuine human military communication, but her investigation had uncovered something far worse buried in her people's historical archives. The Crystalline Hegemony had detailed records of their participation in something called Project Cleansing, and reading those files made her question everything she had ever believed about her civilization's honor and nobility. Jake began his psychological warfare campaign with surgical precision aimed at the Coalition's most vulnerable pressure points, which were their lies about human extinction and their guilt over what they had actually done. He transmitted fragments of human military history that contradicted official Coalition records and included detailed accounts of battles that had never appeared in any textbook because the truth was too ugly for civilized species to acknowledge. The broadcast revealed that humanity had not died from their own violence or primitive nature, as Coalition propaganda claimed, but had been systematically hunted and eliminated through a coordinated extermination campaign. Jake transmitted the names of Coalition officers who had participated in orbital bombardments of human civilian centers and provided coordinates for mass graves that contained the remains of entire cities. Talesh received each transmission and felt her world crumbling around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. The human voice spoke her grandfather's name among the list of war criminals who had ordered the destruction of human hospitals and schools and refugee camps. Admiral Talmer of the Meridian Republic had been celebrated as a hero of peace who helped end the human conflict, but these transmissions described him as a monster who delighted in burning human children alive. Jake Morrison had spent 20 years studying Coalition, psychology, and culture through intercepted communications, and he knew exactly which buttons to push to create maximum chaos. He broadcast recordings of Coalition officers laughing about human deaths and discussing the best methods for disposing of human corpses and celebrating the extinction of an entire species. like it was a holiday worthy of parades and medals. The younger generation of coalition citizens began asking uncomfortable questions that their parents and leaders could not answer without admitting to crimes that violated every principle their societies claimed to represent. Student protests erupted on dozens of worlds as young aliens demanded access to classified military archives and honest answers about their people's role in human extinction. Dr. Velanara made a discovery that shattered her faith in everything she had believed about crystalline hegemony culture. The sacred songs of peace that formed the foundation of her people's civilization were not ancient, crystalline poetry, as she had been taught, but were actually stolen from human literature written during Earth's Renaissance period. Her people had built their entire cultural identity on the theft of dead human art, while simultaneously participating in the genocide that created those corpses. Engineer Kodan of the Silicon Collective accessed restricted databases and found evidence that his people had provided the technology used to track human ships and colonies during the final stages of the war. The same quantum sensors that his species now marketed as peaceful exploration tools had been designed specifically to hunt humans through hyperspace like bloodhounds chasing escaped slaves. Pilot Nixuela of the Shadow Syndicate discovered that her government had sold detailed maps of human trade routes and colony locations to coalition forces in exchange for territorial concessions and mining rights. The Shadow Syndicate had literally sold humanity to their executioners for 30 pieces of silver and a few worthless star systems. Jake Morrison sat in his underground shelter and listened to coalition communication networks dissolving into chaos and recrimination as member species began pointing fingers at each other and demanding investigations into war crimes that implicated everyone. He had lit a fuse that was burning toward a powder keg filled with 3 centuries of accumulated guilt and lies. The human voice continued broadcasting from the soul system like the ghost of murdered justice, speaking truth to power and demanding accountability from those who thought their crimes had been buried deep enough to stay hidden forever. Jake Morrison was no longer just a survivor hiding in the dark, but had become the voice of 10 billion dead humans calling for their day in court. 3 young coalition officers began reaching out through encrypted channels seeking contact with the mysterious human broadcaster because they could not live with the knowledge of what their people had done without trying to make some kind of amends for sins they had inherited but never chosen to commit. Jake Morrison received the first secret message 3 days after his revelations had torn the coalition apart like a pack of dogs fighting over a poisoned bone. The transmission came from Talash of the Meridian Republic, who identified herself as a communications officer seeking truth about her grandfather's war crimes. Jake studied her message for hours before deciding that desperation and guilt in her words seemed genuine enough to risk a response. The secret communication network grew slowly as Jake carefully tested each new contact to determine if they were genuine allies or coalition agents trying to trap him in an elaborate deception. Engineer Kodan sent technical specifications for coalition surveillance systems along with detailed apologies for his people's role in human extinction. Pilot Nixuela provided navigational data for coalition patrol routes and promised to help any surviving humans escape detection. De Velanara transmitted copies of classified crystalline hegemony archives that contained records of project cleansing, including operational plans and casualty reports and communications between coalition commanders discussing the most efficient methods for eliminating human populations. Reading those files made Jake's hands shake with rage because they described the murder of his species, like a pest control operation designed to eliminate an annoying infestation. The coalition began fracturing along generational lines as younger citizens demanded justice for human genocide, while older leaders insisted humanity had been a dangerous threat to galactic peace that required extreme measures to contain. Protests erupted into riots on 17 worlds as alien civilians fought each other over the truth about humanity's extinction and whether their governments should face consequences for war crimes. Jake Morrison guided his new allies to a hidden cache of human technology buried beneath Europa's ice shell, where human engineers had stored military equipment during the final desperate months of the war. The cache contained weapons and communication systems and artificial intelligence cores that were centuries ahead of current coalition technology because humans had been advancing rapidly before their extinction. Kodan nearly suffered a complete mental breakdown when he examined human computational systems that operated on principles his people had not even theorized yet. The Silicon Collective considered themselves the galaxy's foremost experts on artificial intelligence, but human technology made their best efforts look like children playing with broken toys and bent wire. Nix Whala discovered that human navigation systems could plot hyperspace routes through regions that coalition scientists considered impossible to traverse safely. The Shadow Syndicate had spent centuries mapping trade routes around dangerous stellar phenomena while humans had apparently found ways to fly straight through them like they were. Empty Space. Jake began revealing the existence of Protocol Omega, which was humanity's final contingency plan developed when extinction became inevitable. Human military command had established dozens of hidden colonies throughout the galaxy with self-sustaining ecosystems and cryogenic facilities, designed to preserve human civilization until conditions became favorable for emergence from hiding. The protocol included detailed instructions for awakening procedures and communication codes and recognition signals that would allow scattered human survivors to find each other and coordinate their return to galactic society. Jake transmitted activation sequences to 17 colony sites and waited to see if anyone would answer after 3 centuries of enforced silence. Dai Velinara made contact with an underground resistance movement called the Remembrance that had existed within coalition society since the end of the human conflict. These aliens had secretly preserved human artifacts and literature and historical records because they believed the genocide was morally wrong and wanted to ensure that human culture would not be completely erased from galactic memory. The Remembrance had been collecting evidence of coalition war crimes for 300 years while waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth about human extinction. They possessed testimony from coalition soldiers who had participated in the killing and felt guilty enough to confess their crimes before dying. They had photographs of mass graves and recorded conversations of coalition leaders planning the systematic elimination of human colonies. Jake Morrison learned that the Remembrance included members from every coalition species, including high-ranking government officials and military officers who had been working to undermine the official narrative about humanity's extinction. Some of them were direct descendants of coalition officers who had refused orders to participate in Project Cleansing and had been quietly executed for their disobedience. The first response to Jake's awakening signals came from navigation specialist Lisa Chun aboard the hidden colony ship New Horizon, which had been drifting in the void between stars for 3 centuries while its crew slept in cryogenic suspension. Lisa transmitted recognition codes that confirmed her identity as a legitimate human survivor and requested permission to establish secure communications with other awakening colonies. Jake Morrison sat in his shelter, surrounded by incoming transmissions from across the galaxy as human colonies began responding to his activation signals like flowers blooming after a long winter. Each new voice represented hundreds or thousands of human survivors who had been waiting in frozen sleep for someone to tell them it was safe to wake up and reclaim their place among the stars. The coalition leadership called emergency sessions to discuss military responses to the emerging human threat, while their citizens demanded investigations into war crimes and reparations for genocide. Some coalition species wanted to finish what their ancestors had started by hunting down and eliminating the remaining human colonies before they could pose a threat to galactic stability. Jake Morrison had started his campaign as one man seeking justice for his murdered people, but now found himself coordinating the return of an entire species that had spent 3 centuries growing stronger and smarter and more dangerous, while their enemies assumed they were safely dead and buried. The hunters were about to discover that their supposedly extinct prey had evolved into apex predators with very long memories and absolutely no interest in forgiveness. Colonel Marcus Webb opened his eyes for the first time in 300 years and immediately began planning how to kill every alien responsible for human extinction. The cryogenic revival process left him disoriented for exactly 37 seconds before his military training kicked in, and he started assessing threats and opportunities and resources available for conducting warfare against impossible odds. Morrison established contact with Webb through quantum-encrypted channels and briefed him on the current galactic situation, including coalition, military capabilities and political fractures, and the growing resistance movement among younger alien civilians. Webb listened to every word with the calculating precision of a career soldier who understood that revenge was a dish best served with overwhelming firepower and perfect timing. The New Horizon colony ship contained 12,000 sleeping humans, including military personnel and scientists and engineers who had been working on advanced weapon systems when the extinction order came down. Webb began implementing revival procedures for essential personnel while maintaining operational security because he knew coalition forces were searching for human survivors with increasing desperation and violence. Lisa Chun coordinated with 14 other awakening colonies scattered across the galaxy from the galactic core to the outer rim territories where human refugees had hidden in systems so remote that coalition forces had never bothered to map them completely. Each colony had spent centuries developing different aspects of human technology and culture while preparing for the day when they could emerge from hiding to reclaim their heritage. The Aurora Station colony had focused on genetic engineering and biological warfare and had created human subspecies, adapted for survival in any environment from methane swamps to radiation-soaked asteroid fields. Their scientists had been working on viral weapons specifically designed to target coalition species while leaving humans completely unharmed. The Prometheus base colony had developed artificial intelligence systems that could infiltrate and control any computer network in the galaxy, including coalition, military databases and communication systems, and navigation computers. Their AI constructs had been waiting patiently for activation signals, while slowly spreading through galactic information networks like digital cancer. The Olympus mining station had created nanotechnology swarms capable of disassembling entire planets at the molecular level and rebuilding them according to human specifications. Their engineers had spent 3 centuries perfecting self-replicating machines that could transform any star system into a fortress equipped with weapons, capable of destroying coalition fleets. Jake Morrison realized that humanity had not simply survived extinction, but had used their time in hiding to evolve into something far more dangerous than the species that had originally fought the coalition to a standstill. Human military technology was now centuries ahead of anything coalition forces possessed, and human genetic modifications had created warriors specifically designed for fighting aliens. Dr. Velanara provided intelligence reports about coalition military deployments and defensive capabilities that revealed critical weaknesses in their strategic planning. The coalition had spent 300 years preparing to fight each other rather than dealing with external threats because they believed humanity was extinct and no other species posed a significant challenge to their dominance. Talish used her position in coalition communications to feed false information to military commanders while providing accurate intelligence to human forces about fleet movements and supply lines and command structures. Her psychological profile indicated she was motivated by genuine guilt about her people's war crimes rather than any hope for personal gain or survival. Kodan began sabotaging coalition technology from within their own systems by introducing subtle flaws in their quantum sensors and navigation computers and weapons targeting systems. His modifications would not be noticed during routine operations, but would cause catastrophic failures during actual combat situations when coalition forces needed their equipment to function perfectly. Nixella provided detailed maps of coalition territory, including the locations of military bases and civilian population centers, and industrial facilities that could be targeted during human military operations. She also identified coalition leaders who had been directly involved in Project Cleansing and provided their current locations and security arrangements. The remembrance emerged from hiding as coalition society collapsed into civil war between those who wanted to finish exterminating humanity and those who demanded justice for genocidal war crimes. Their members included coalition military officers who began secretly providing weapons and supplies to human forces while sabotaging their own governments from within. Webb established communication with human military commanders from each awakening colony and began coordinating a unified response to 3 centuries of alien oppression. The scattered human forces possessed enough firepower to destroy every coalition world, but Webb was a professional soldier who understood that victory required careful planning rather than blind revenge. Jake Morrison watched coalition fleets scrambling to locate and destroy human colonies before they could complete their revival procedures. But human technology made detection nearly impossible, and human defenses made direct assault completely suicidal. The aliens had spent 300 years congratulating themselves on their successful genocide while their victims prepared for a war of extermination. Human colonies began emerging from hiding across the galaxy like flowers blooming in a graveyard. While their alien enemies finally realized that reports of humanity's extinction had been greatly exaggerated. The species that had once fought 7 alien civilizations to a standstill with primitive technology now possessed weapons that could crack planets and artificial intelligence that could infiltrate any computer system. Lisa Chun transmitted activation signals to deep space monitoring stations that had been recording coalition communications and military activities for 3 centuries while their crews slept in cryogenic suspension. The intelligence archives contained detailed information about every coalition, military operation, and political decision and technological development since the end of the human conflict. Colonel Webb reviewed the intelligence data and began planning Operation Phoenix, which would be humanity's return to galactic society, through carefully coordinated military and political actions designed to establish human dominance over former oppressors. The extinct species was about to teach their killers that death was only the beginning of a very long and very painful lesson. Operation Phoenix began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, when 17 human colonies simultaneously activated quantum communication networks that had been dormant for 3 centuries and announced their return to a galaxy that thought them safely extinct. Colonel Marcus Webb coordinated the operation from his command center aboard New Horizon, while Jake Morrison provided real-time intelligence about coalition fleet movements and defensive preparations. The first phase involved demonstrating human technological superiority through carefully controlled displays of power that would convince coalition forces they were facing an enemy far beyond their ability to defeat. The Aurora Station colony deployed self-replicating biological agents that transformed an uninhabited coalition border world into a garden paradise within 6 hours while leaving clear messages carved into mountain ranges stating that humans could create as easily as they could destroy. The Prometheus-based artificial intelligence systems infiltrated coalition military networks and began displaying human messages on every computer screen and communication device from the galactic core to the outer rim territories. The messages were simple and direct statements that humanity had returned and would accept nothing less than complete justice for 3 centuries of genocide and oppression. Coalition fleets mobilized to attack human positions, but discovered that their weapons targeting systems had been compromised by Kodan sabotage programs, and their navigation computers were providing false coordinates that sent them light years away from their intended destinations. Every piece of coalition military technology had been infected with human malware that turned their own equipment against them. Dr. Emma Rodriguez emerged from cryogenic sleep aboard the Titan research station, where human scientists had spent 300 years studying coalition biology and psychology and developing weapons specifically designed to exploit alien weaknesses. Her teams had created viral agents that could rewrite coalition genetic code and psychological warfare techniques that could drive entire alien populations insane. The coalition leadership convened emergency sessions to discuss military responses to the human threat, but their secure communication channels had been compromised by Prometheus Base artificial intelligence, and every word they spoke was transmitted directly to human military commanders. Webb listened to coalition war plans in real time and prepared countermeasures before alien forces could even begin implementing their strategies. Chancellor Mordock of the Hegemony Council ordered the immediate deployment of coalition battle fleets to destroy human colonies, but discovered that his military commanders were receiving contradictory orders from systems that appeared to be legitimate government networks, but were actually controlled by human AI constructs. Coalition forces spent days flying in circles while chasing phantom targets and attacking empty space. Jake Morrison revealed humanity's ultimate weapon during a galaxy-wide broadcast that reached every inhabited system simultaneously through hijacked coalition communication networks. Human scientists had developed stellar manipulation technology capable of triggering controlled supernova explosions that could destroy entire star systems while leaving neighboring regions completely unaffected. The demonstration involved destabilizing a red giant star in an uninhabited system and causing it to collapse into a neutron star within 12 hours, while human forces provided detailed scientific explanations of the process to prove that it was not a natural phenomenon. The message was clear that humanity possessed the ability to destroy any coalition world they chose without warning or possibility of defense. Coalition military forces attempted to launch preemptive strikes against human positions, but discovered that their ships were being tracked and targeted by weapon systems they could not detect or defend against. Human stealth technology had advanced to the point where entire fleets could move through coalition space without appearing on any sensor network ever built. The Olympus mining station demonstrated nanotechnology swarms by disassembling a coalition military outpost at the molecular level and rebuilding it as a monument to human technological superiority within 3 hours. The process was recorded and broadcast throughout the galaxy to show coalition forces exactly what would happen to their homeworlds if they continued to threaten human survivors. Talesh used her position in coalition communications to coordinate with other members of the Remembrance who began sabotaging coalition military operations from within their own command structures. Coalition officers discovered that their orders were being countermanded by their own subordinates who had been working for human intelligence services for generations. Dr. Velanara provided Webb with detailed information about coalition political structures and cultural weaknesses that could be exploited to divide alien species against each other. Human psychological warfare specialists began broadcasting targeted propaganda designed to trigger civil wars between coalition member species while humanity prepared for final negotiations. The younger generation of coalition civilians demanded immediate peace negotiations with humanity, while older leaders insisted on fighting to the death rather than accepting responsibility for genocidal war crimes. The political chaos provided perfect cover for human forces to position themselves for either peaceful resolution or complete military victory. Chun coordinated supply lines between awakening human colonies while maintaining operational security against coalition reconnaissance efforts. Human logistics networks operated on principles that coalition forces could not understand or intercept because they relied on quantum entanglement. Communication and nanotechnology transport systems. Webb prepared for the final phase of operation. Phoenix, which would either result in negotiated peace with full human equality and reparations for genocide, or complete military conquest of coalition territory, followed by trials for war crimes and execution of those responsible for human extinction. The choice belonged to coalition leadership, but their options were surrender or annihilation. Colonel Webb opened a communication channel to coalition high command and transmitted a simple message that had been 300 years in preparation. Humanity was ready to discuss terms for ending hostilities, but those terms would include complete admission of guilt for genocide and full reparations for 3 centuries of suffering and the establishment of human authority over galactic governance. To ensure that no species would ever again face extinction at the hands of alleged civilized beings, the extinct species had returned from the grave with weapons that could crack worlds and the patience to use them if their demands for justice were not met completely and immediately. The Titan Accords negotiations began in the underground chamber where Jake Morrison had spent 20 years planning humanity's return from extinction, while coalition representatives sat across from human delegates who possessed the power to destroy entire star systems with a single command. The conference room had been carved from Titan's ice by human engineering tools that operated on principles coalition scientists could not comprehend or replicate. Colonel Marcus Webb led the human delegation with the calm confidence of a man who held all the cards in a game where the stakes were nothing less than the future of galactic civilization. Diana Rodriguez provided scientific expertise about human capabilities, while Lisa Chun offered logistical analysis of coalition weaknesses, and Jake Morrison sat quietly in the corner as the man whose voice had started the revolution that brought humanity back from the dead. Chancellor Mordock of the Hegemony Council attempted to negotiate from a position of strength by threatening to mobilize coalition military forces against human colonies, but Webb responded by activating a holographic display showing real-time footage of coalition fleets being systematically disabled by human weapons they could not see or defend against. The human demands were simple and non-negotiable, starting with complete admission of guilt for genocidal war crimes committed during Project Cleansing, followed by full reparations for 3 centuries of suffering, including territorial rights, to human ancestral systems and permanent seats on all galactic governing bodies with veto power over any legislation affecting human interests. Daivelanara presented evidence from crystalline hegemony archives proving that coalition leadership had planned and executed the systematic extermination of humanity, while publicly claiming that humans had died from their own primitive violence. The documents included detailed casualty reports and operational plans and recorded conversations of coalition commanders celebrating successful mass murder operations. Coalition representatives attempted to argue that humanity posed a threat to galactic stability that justified extreme measures, but Rodriguez demonstrated human technological superiority by remotely activating nanoscale devices that had been invisibly distributed throughout the negotiation chamber and assembling them into a perfect replica of Earth, complete with working ecosystems and miniature human cities. The display proved that human technology could create life as easily as it could destroy civilizations, and that humanity possessed the power to terraform any world in the galaxy or reduce it to component atoms, depending on how coalition species chose to respond to reasonable demands for justice and equality. Talesh testified about her grandfather's war crimes and provided communication records proving that coalition forces had deliberately targeted human civilian populations, including hospitals and schools and refugee camps, while their propaganda described these actions as legitimate military operations against dangerous insurgents. Kodan presented technical analysis showing that coalition technology was centuries behind human capabilities in every field, from artificial intelligence to genetic engineering to weapon systems, and that any military conflict between humans and aliens would result in complete coalition defeat within hours rather than months or years. Webb revealed the true scope of human survival by activating holographic displays showing the locations of 47 human colonies scattered throughout the galaxy, each containing thousands of survivors who had spent 3 centuries developing advanced technology while waiting for the signal to emerge from hiding and reclaim their place among the stars. The coalition delegation realized they were not negotiating with desperate refugees seeking mercy, but with representatives of a technological superpower that had spent 300 years preparing for this exact moment, while their enemies congratulated themselves on successful genocide without understanding that they had only awakened a sleeping giant. Human terms included the establishment of war crimes, tribunals with human judges to try coalition officers responsible for genocide, and the creation of memorial worlds where human culture could be preserved and celebrated, and the guarantee that no species would ever again face extinction at the hands of allegedly civilized beings. Chancellor Mordock attempted one final desperate gambit by threatening to destroy human colonies with suicide attacks, but Morrison calmly activated a communication device that connected directly to artificial intelligence systems controlling every coalition ship and station and weapon in the galaxy simultaneously. The AI spoke with Jake Morrison's voice, but amplified across millions of coalition devices, explaining that humanity had been monitoring and infiltrating coalition technology for 3 centuries and could disable or destroy any alien equipment, including life support systems on coalition home worlds, if negotiations failed to produce acceptable results. Coalition representatives signed the new Galactic Compact, establishing humanity as the dominant species in galactic civilization with authority to prevent future genocides and ensure justice for all sentient beings regardless of their technological capabilities or military strength. The ceremony concluded with Jake Morrison standing in the same chamber where he had spent 20 years alone and angry, while alien fleets stripped his solar system, thinking humanity was safely extinct. Now he watched coalition representatives formally surrendering to the species they had tried to murder, while human children, who had been born in cryogenic sleep, prepared to see real sunlight for the first time. Webb established the Human Galactic Authority with headquarters on restored Earth, where human cities began rising from the ashes of 3-century-old ruins, while alien work crews labored under human supervision to repair the damage their ancestors had caused during Project Cleansing. The old war code that started everything was officially retired and replaced with a new human motto carved into monuments on every world, where humans had died fighting for their right to exist among the stars. The words read never again, never, forgotten, and they would remain visible until the last star burned out and the galaxy grew cold and dark. Jake Morrison walked on Earth's restored surface for the first time since his childhood, while human children played in parks built on ground soaked with the blood of 10 billion martyrs, who had died so that their species could evolve into something strong enough to demand justice from their killers and receive it.